Okay, now that we've gone through and we've learned how to calculate the slope given 2 points, we're going to go through and what we can see in this standard 11, find the missing value when you are given the slope. So in the last standard we had to calculate the slope. This time you are given the slope and you have to figure out what the missing coordinate is. So there are going to be a total of 7 problems and you're going to add one to the back. Okay, but we're going to start with this. So we already know that when we find the slope, to find the slope, we know that the slope is the change in y over the change in x, right? Which means that is going to be y sub 2 minus y sub 1 divided by x sub 2 minus x sub 1. All right, well, I have xy, xy, right? And this can be x1, y1. This can be x2, y2, or it can be the other way around. It doesn't really matter. So xy, xy, that's already written there, right? I'm going to call these the 1s. I'll call these the 2s. Excuse me for a second, guys. Okay, so we've got our coordinates for x1 and y1. We have our coordinates for x2 and y2. But then we are given the actual slope. And you know that I like to put the negative signs with the numerator. So I'm going to call that negative 6/5, where I'm putting the negative up in the numerator. So when I have y sub 2 minus y sub 1, y sub 2 is simply y, minus y sub 1 is 5, x sub 2 is 9, minus from the formula, right? And x sub 1 is negative 1. This is going to give me y minus 5 in the numerator. And this is going to give me 9 minus negative 1, right? When you subtract a negative, you're really adding, so that's going to be 10. And that needs to equal negative 6/5. Okay, so what we can do now is simply solve it like a proportion. Okay, so I'm going to have y minus 5 times the quantity 5. So 5 times y minus 5 is going to be equal to 10 times negative 6. So I'm going to go ahead and say 5 times the quantity y minus 5 equals negative 60. I'm going to divide both sides by 5. I get y minus 5 equals negative 12. Add 5 to both sides. And I'm going to get y equals negative 7. Okay, on number 2, and that's how we go through and solve them. So on number 2, we know that we have the slope, which is the change in y over the change in x, which is going to be equal to y sub 2 minus y sub 1 divided by x sub 2 minus x sub 1. It does not matter which you call x1, y1, x2, y2. So just to show you something different, we can have xy, we can have x and y. I can call this one the 2s and I can call this one the 1s. Why? Just because it doesn't matter. That's all I'm trying to show you, is it doesn't matter. So I have y sub 2, which is going to be the y, minus y sub 1, which is negative 7. I have x sub 2, which is 0, minus x sub 1, which is negative 5. I'm going to go ahead and simplify this. Y minus negative 7 is y plus 7. And 0 minus negative 5 is 0 plus 5, which is going to be 5. And what does this have to be set equal to? Well, this is the slope. So they tell us that the slope is going to be 13/5. So I'm setting it equal to 13/5. Okay? All right. So now there's a couple different ways to do this. You can go through and do cross multiplication because it's proportions. And then what I can see is I'm going to go ahead and divide both sides by 5 because I've got 5 times this and I have 5 times this, I can go ahead and divide each of these by 5. Don't forget, just do it. This is all one term, right? Until you distribute, it's one term, so you divide once. Same here. Before we multiply, we can simplify 5 divided by 5 is positive 1. So then I end up with y plus 7 equals 13. Subtract the 7 from both sides, and I get y equals 6. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and say this is x1, y1. This is x2, y2. I'm going to say the slope is the change in y over the change in x, which is y sub 2 minus y sub 1, divided by x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Y sub 2 is negative 4. Y sub 1 is just y, so minus y. X sub 2 is going to be negative 2. Darn it, too little space, so I'm going to rewrite it over here. I'm going to have negative 4 minus y, and then my x sub 2 is negative 2, and my x sub 1 is 0, so negative 2 minus 0. I'm going to simplify that. In the numerator, I cannot simplify. They're not like terms. In the denominator, I'm going to get negative 2. What should that equal? That should equal a slope of 6. Okay, then what I can do, I can go ahead and say that's 6 over 1, but when I multiply this by 1, nothing changes. So I'm going to have negative 4 minus y equals negative 2 times 6. That's going to give me negative 4 minus y equals negative 12. Add 4 to both sides. The opposite of y is equal to negative 8. Divide both sides by negative 1. I get y equals positive 8. Okay, this is number 3. Looks like I should have given myself a little bit more space to write. I'll try and write smaller. Okay, so I have x and y. Those are my 1s. I have x and y. Those are my 2s. I'm going to have the slope, which is going to be y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Y sub 2 is just y, minus from the formula y sub 1 is 5. X sub 2 is negative 7, minus from the formula x sub 1 is negative 5. I'm going to go ahead and simplify that. In the numerator, I'm going to have y minus 5. In the denominator, I'm going to have negative 7 minus negative 5. When you subtract a negative, you really add. So that's going to be negative 2. And then now I'm going to set it equal to what the slope tells me, which is 0. Okay, I need to have this as a fraction. So I'm going to say 0 over... Now here's the thing. As long as I make the numerator 0, it doesn't matter what this number is. The numerator has to be 0 in order to have a slope of 0. Because 0 divided by any number down here will be 0. So I don't even need to worry about this. What I need is y minus 5 to become equal to 0. I need y minus 5 to equal 0. Add 5 to both sides. I get y equals 5.